The Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, says that South Africa is working to keep its borders with the rest of the continent open following days of unrest and looting in KwaZulu-Natal, which is the country's gateway to the rest of the continent. Dr. Pandor noted that South Africa's main trading partners are in Africa, and it's therefore crucial to keep all trade routes open and operational, noting that this is the only way the country's economy, already battered by COVID-19, begins to recover. She spoke in Namibia during bilateral talks with Namibia's Deputy Prime Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwah. Sarah Kimani has been following the story for us.
After days of unrest and looting, it is time to clean up and count the cost of the mayhem that left at least 70 dead and property worth millions destroyed. Dr. Pandor admitted that the violence will deal a blow to efforts at economic recovery.
The economy was just beginning to recover from the worst effects of the pandemic. This is going to further reverse our economic growth.
Dr. Pandor, while speaking in Namibia, reassured the rest of the continent that the country remains open for business as fears grow that chaos in KwaZulu-Natal will affect the transportation of goods from Durban, Africa's biggest port.
Our government is acting to restore law and order because this is very important to economic activity in South Africa. We are keeping the borders open. We are working very closely with the business sector to ensure that goods continue to move. We were able to successfully do so during the worst effects of the pandemic. And it is South Africa's duty to ensure the free flow of goods between countries in the region and South Africa. In fact, the biggest trading partners of South Africa are on the African continent.
On Eswatini, which was 2 weeks ago rocked by protests against the country's absolute monarch, the minister said the SADC region's striker will send a fact-finding mission to the country.
Eswatini has requested the chair of the organ, which is Botswana, of the SADC organ on politics, defense and security, that the organ chair should oversee the creation of a task team that would be deployed to Eswatini to fully examine the issues that occurred there in the past few weeks and to interview both government and non-government stakeholders in order to get a full picture of the situation and to report to SADC at its summit in August 2021.
King Mswati has called for national dialogue and is due to address the nation on Friday. Sarah Kimani, SABC News.
So how is South Africa being viewed by the outside world following days of what started off as protests and then became just looting, criminality and violence? Well, to discuss this and other issues, we're now joined by Dr. David Monyae, who's the Director for the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. How do you think the world is taking in the scenes that they're seeing about South Africa?
I think there's a mixed bag. On one hand, the looting, thuggery that has been taking place has really brought a shocking scenery to a world that has seen South Africa that is of Mandela, South Africa that is democratic with strong institutions and rule of law. And therefore, I think it came sudden and quite shocking that most people across the continent are still absorbing what they have seen on their televisions.
I mean, the first shock, I think, for a lot of people, particularly on the continent, was the idea that a former head of state can actually be jailed in South Africa. That really took people by surprise. And so that what then followed, I suppose, was just like, what is going on?
Indeed. And that's where the mixed bag comes in. On one hand, I think it's a highly respected country where the institutions of governance are still strong, and that withstood the entire misgovern by the former President Jacob Zuma, and reaching a point where the Constitutional Court has taken action. It's something that is unusual on the African continent, and therefore I think there was that sense of relief, celebration, something that most African countries would like to learn from South Africa. However, this celebration was short-lived because there are certain fundamental challenges in the body politics in South Africa that since 1994, there are quite a number of things that haven't been done, that should be done. And I think it goes beyond the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma. I think it gives us a window of an opportunity to deal with those outstanding issues. In dealing with stability, failure doing so, I think we're going to see 10 times of what we have seen now. And we still have the opportunity to, after the mopping of the entire mess, to really sit down and say our political and economic system is unsustainable. Inequality, poverty, unemployment, all these issues need to be tackled head on in an unusual way, instead of going to the usual way in parliament and debate issue endlessly and coming up with policies that are not implemented, whether on land or the education system and a whole list of other issues that were really unresolved since 1994.
The Minister of International Relations and Cooperation is saying that it's very important for us to try and keep our borders open. But I'm going to take that a step further a little bit. Might there be investors who are getting scared off by what they're seeing?
There might be, but I think it will be short-lived. As you can see, this was well orchestrated. However, the challenges are enormous, the number of people that were on the streets. And it was limited to mainly to 2 provinces, highly urbanized, massive number of people coming from across the continent and within the country, are mainly unemployed. And therefore, I think the international community will also do a due diligence and understand the underlying causes of this crisis, and to also realize that it's also an element of incompetence in terms of how the government responded. It could have been, the damage could have been limited. However, I think going forward with lessons learned, I think there will be an understanding that and pressure for South Africans to handle some of these issues in a better way in the future.
There will be risk analysts who will be looking back and saying, we've seen these scenes before. It wasn't Zuma the last time. It might have been Somali entrepreneurs. And then before that, it was xenophobia. And they all ended up in the same way, looting and burning of shops. How do we calm the fears of these risk analysts?
I think that answer and question need to be really put at the doors of the ANC. I think since 1994, I think the party has firstly failed to deal with internal issues. Most of what we are seeing are internal ANC factional politics that is now on the streets. And post-1994, certain strategies and tactics that were used for freedom, mobilizing people and the like, while as a governing party, I think the party has failed to reform as well as to modernize itself, to realize that this constant fight with itself and to see the state as an alien entity has to come to an end, that people are alienated from the very same state that they own and the government that they voted. And therefore, I think there is a need to bring peace within the party itself through reforms, anti-corruption, the rule of law, and therefore those who were thinking that the former president will have an advantage out of this mess, I doubt very much. I think we're going to see the strengthening of institutions of governance going forward. Those who are being arrested are tried and a due process taking place. And therefore, I think that will bring in confidence for investors from the continent and across the world.
Do you think that President Ramaphosa might have fielded some calls from his peers in the international community?
Indeed, there's no doubt that he received a lot of calls, both internally and externally. I think what is needed now is really to do an assessment and for him to look at the cabinet and see to it what is it that he can do. If I was the president or advisor to the president, I would say shake the cabinet. I think he needs to take a very strong position and put in cabinet ministers that will align with himself, and he can't wait until next year with the electoral conference of the ANC in 2022. I think he needs to take action now so that he has people that he can trust. I doubt very much that the entire cabinet was really lining and responding to his needs at this critical moment.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, we were speaking to Reverend Frank Chikane a little bit earlier on today, and he spoke about a group of people whose time is up and they are almost the last kicks of a dying horse. Do you get a sense that this is the worst before a period of calm and renewal?
Indeed. I think as bad as things look at the moment, it might have strengthened President Ramaphosa's hand. What is needed is for him to move speedily and steadily in terms of reforming the party, align himself with quite a number of goodwill people out there that would want to see the rule of law, anti-corruption, and really not to rally around people, dubious characters within the party. And therefore, I think from now onwards, we will see the party itself taking advantage of the situation. It also comes at a time when the opposition is not that strong in South Africa, whether it's DA and others. Other than EFF, I think ANC still has huge support, and they might turn this situation around, banking on those who are outside the party who still have sentimental value with the former liberation movement.
Do you think that a situation like this might have, I'm just thinking there might be neighboring states who might be concerned that, our citizens might learn from South Africa how to manage us. Do you think that this kind of thing could spread?
No doubt about that. I think what is going to spread is both the positive and the negative. I think the positive is the strengthening of institutions of governance and separation of power. I think you might start seeing, it's already happening in some parts of the continent, for instance, in Kenya, where the judiciary is really putting a stop to some of the moves made by the executive. And I think this will be seen in a number of other countries, whether it's in Zimbabwe or neighboring Namibia and others. And the negative is similarly, I think, is the same challenge, that with the bulk of young people, the youth in particular, unemployed and really starving at a time when we are faced with a pandemic, might be forced to take some of these actions. But I doubt very much that it will reach the magnitude as it happened here in South Africa.
All right, but I mean, what we've seen has taken us by surprise. The Arab Spring started in Tunisia. At that point, Egypt had no idea, and Libya, for sure, had no idea. So why do you think it might not escalate to the same points in other countries?
It might escalate, but South Africa's story is a bit contradictory. I doubt very much that any coup, a military coup, would have sustained itself. Even though people were protesting, they did not want the president out of power. They did not want to unseat or destroy the state itself. It's an issue of opposing certain things that are taking place. I mean, obviously with the name of former President Jacob Zuma. However, poverty, unemployment, and some of long-standing issues, I think they were coming to the fore. But in other countries, a total different story. They might go for head of states. They might go in terms of military coup and the like. And therefore, we're living in a very unstable situation on the continent.